All right, good morning. Welcome to a very rare Monday edition of the press conference. I guess that's because the monthly meeting was a Monday, so we don't do that very often. Exciting week here at the FCC and across government. This week marks the first 100 days of this Trump administration. We've been moving very, very quickly at the FCC. We will have a lot of information out this week, summarizing some of the work that we've gotten done over the first 100 days, probably more information than what you guys will even want to see. But we've been working on everything from restoring America's leadership in wireless to helping to unleash high-speed infrastructure builds. We've been working very hard to expand America's space economy, including through actions potentially that we are teeing up today. We've been looking to eliminate needless regulations, including launching the probably largest deregulatory initiative at the FCC in our delete proceeding. We're also focused on delivering efficient results at the agency. We've been working hard to do a top-to-bottom review of all of the contracts that we have. We have already reduced hundreds of millions of dollars of sort of long-term spend that we would have had under contracts that we don't think we need anymore. We've been returning folks to the building. It's been great to see. I've continued my walkabouts around the agency, and it's been very helpful to bump into more and more people inside the building. I think that's great. We've been working to protect consumers, cracking down on robocalls, taking a lot of actions on that front, and we've been strengthening our national security and public safety as well. We have a Council on National Security that we've stood up, and they've already launched some work streams that I think are going to bear fruit. With that, happy to open it up and take some of your questions. We can start down here.
Hi, Chairman Carr. Chris Cole with Law 360. I just wanted to ask about the 5G fund because you had indicated when the rules were passed, I guess it was last year, that the auction needed to wait until BEAD is fully rolled out, but now there may be some delays in that, so I'm wondering if that changes your view.
Yeah, my concern back then was that we had a little bit of the cart before the horse. You know, we had an issue then where we had lots and lots of different initiatives, lots of funding streams, including BEAD being sort of the largest of all of those, the $42 billion program. And originally the idea was you would see where BEAD goes, and then potentially there'd be other funding streams that could fill in the gaps. The timing wasn't clear back then about how all these programs were going to be aligned, and that's what I expressed my concerns about. No announcement today to make on that particular effort, though. But again, the key there is you want to make sure that things are moving efficiently, that they're complementing each other, and that we have sort of technology-neutral ways forward across the board.
Yeah, can you go into any more detail about the contracts that you've eliminated? Oh, contracts for what?
So we've done a look
Excuse me, Monty Taylor, Con Daly, sorry.
I know you are. We have set up our own sort of internal DOGE effort, and we have pulled every single contract that the FCC has, and we're doing a look as to whether we need it or not. We'll provide probably more this week as part of our first 100 days on some of the details of that, but I think in one instance we had a contract. Where's Delacorte? Is he here? Here. A hog trapping contract worth $50,000 or $60,000 a year. $50,000 a year. So that's one example. So hog trapping contract has been ended. Unrelated, if you enjoy hog trapping and want to do it for free, we will show you some of the FCC's properties that apparently had hog problems back in the day. So we're doing a look at sort of all sorts of different contracts. Obviously IT in particular is a big one. Long term, we want to try to move into a different environment from an IT perspective. For years, we've had these, individual, siloed, bespoke systems that are getting pretty old and clunky, and I think we can ultimately drive a lot of long-term efficiencies there as well. So it's really, looking at all the contracts that exist.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Chairman Carr, John Hendel with Politico. Just wanted to ask about kind of what's next in the 60 Minutes proceeding. There's been a lot of comments coming in. We've seen President Trump himself weigh in a couple weeks ago, calling for kind of maximum fines and punishment related to 60 Minutes. At this point, when you're looking at this, what do you see as the menu of potential regulatory consequences, and what would be needed for resolution at this point? And we've had comments, we've had the unedited material. Kind of where is that now?
Well, look, all options remain on the table. That continues to be an open investigation. We thought that transparency was important, letting the American people participate in that proceeding, and that's exactly what we've done. As you've noted, we've taken in comments from the public. Personally, I have not, reviewed those comments at this point, but at some point we will get to it in terms of reviewing the comments and making a final decision. I mean, again, if you step back more broadly in terms of the approach that I'm driving at on media, I think the best way to think about the media ecosystem within the confines of this discussion, at least, is two pieces. On the one hand, you've got the national media programmers, principally ABC, CBS, and NBC. And when you look at all of the studies about trust in media right now, trust in media is at an all-time low. But it's not uniform. There's that second level, which is the actual local broadcasters that are licensed by the FCC, and trust there is actually significantly higher. And that's because you have local news, you have reporters. These are people that see these personalities in their community. One of the big things I'm trying to do with my media policy is to empower those local broadcasters to serve the needs of their local communities. Localism is one of the key guide stars of our media policy. So as I've been thinking about this, I think it's important to separate in people's mind the difference between national programmers and the local broadcasters. Let's empower those local broadcasters, but also they're the ones that ultimately have the public interest obligation. And there's potentially lots of things that we can do to make sure that they feel like they have the freedom to serve the needs of their local communities. Affiliation agreements are really interesting. A lot of them have been coming due. I wrote a letter, actually at the end of last year, to ABC on that, to look at ways in which affiliation agreements potentially are being used to, one, exercise potentially too much control over local broadcasters, which could ultimately become an attribution issue that we would need to look at. But also we want to make sure that these arrangements between national programmers, ABC, NBC, CBS, and the local broadcasters enable a healthy TV broadcast media ecosystem. We don't want local broadcasters to ultimately go the way of newspapers. And when you look at the current dynamic, I'm not sure it's entirely healthy. So I want strong local broadcasters that feel empowered to serve their local communities. And I think if you look at a lot of what we're doing on media, it can be explained by trying to drive towards that goal. So.
Hi, Ted Johnson from Deadline. Actually, two related questions. One, what is the timeline, the status of your review of the Skydance Paramount merger? And the related question is, if the president settles his lawsuit with CBS and then orders you to approve that merger because of that settlement, how will you react to that? What will you do?
Well, the settlement and any discussions around that have nothing to do with the work that we're doing at the FCC. I mean, there's at least three different things that are going on. There's the litigation, of which we're not a part of, and there's been no discussions about. There is the transaction that's before us. There is the CBS News distortion, and we're taking those last two, running our normal course. On the CBS transaction itself, we are getting close to the informal 180-day clock. I think we're somewhere in the 160s, but we're just running our normal process across a lot of different transactions right now, and we're just going to apply the law and the facts and the record and move forward.
But if the president says approve this, would that have an impact on your decision? How would you react to that?
Well, look, like I said, we are simply focused on the record that's before us, and we're going to make our decision based on the agency's record itself, and can't sort of engage in the type of speculation that you have laid out there. So,
thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, Jericho Casper with Broadband Breakfast. Mr. Chairman, approaching your first 100 days this Wednesday, I'm curious if you set out to achieve everything that you have you achieved everything that you set out to? And now
everything and more. Everything and more.
Yeah. Now that the deregulatory proceeding is playing out, what's your next priority?
There's a lot that we've done, particularly on the media front, that gets a tremendous amount of coverage. I understand that. Also, the media likes to cover issues involving the media, but there's some stories that I think are haven't gotten the same headlines that we've done that we're going to continue to expand on. For instance, making sure that providers can invest in new high-speed networks is going to be one of the more significant work streams that we do. Copper retirement is a piece of that. We've already taken some actions on that front. I'd like to continue to look for ways that we can create the certainty so we don't have to people invest limited capital in two different networks, an old copper one, where hopefully we want them investing in new ones. So I think that's going to be a big one. Spectrum, we've been doing a lot of work there. Obviously, there continues to be lots of talks across government. As Congress works towards reconciliation, I'm hopeful that that's a place that we will get our auction authority restored, and then we will be sort of further off to the races on that. So there's a lot of work streams that we're doing. The the deregulation initiative. We've been doing a lot of spade work at the FCC. We've had all the bureaus and offices basically complete an initial sweep of all of their regulations with an eye towards, which ones we need to keep, which ones we need to modify, which ones do we have the freedom to just go ahead and delete. So I think that's going to bear a lot of fruit as well. So, some of the same themes that you've seen in the first 100 days, but I think we're just going to be able to expand action as well, because ultimately we want to put forward a build agenda, an agenda that allows people to invest, whether it's in physical infrastructure here, whether it's in the space economy. I think those are areas that we're going to be pushing really hard on.
Thank you.
Thanks. Dave Sherbetson from Reuters. I just want to go back to media for a second and ask you a couple related questions. One, have you decided whether to tee up the Disney or Comcast complaints for public comment, like you did with the CBS 60 Minutes complaint? And President Trump 2 weeks ago wrote, it was referenced that he hopes that you will impose the maximum fines and punishment, which is substantial for their unlawful and illegal behavior as a result of a 60 Minutes broadcast. Have you talked to him about that? Have you taken any steps toward doing that? Do you think it's appropriate for the president to publicly encourage you to go after the network for those remarks?
Well, no decisions have been made in terms of seeking public comment on those two that you raised. Again, I think if you step back, broadcasters have a very unique position in the market when it comes to other entities. They are licensed by the FCC, and when you license someone to operate, you're necessarily prohibiting others from using those airwaves. Because of that, they have a public interest obligation. And I think over the years, the FCC has largely stepped back from enforcing the public interest standard. I'm not sure I don't think that's correct. I think given the unique benefits that come from a federal broadcast license, it's important for the FCC to actually hold these entities accountable to the public interest. And there's a lot of rules and regulations that flow from that. News distortion is a piece of it. And I believe that the FCC should be vigorously enforcing the public interest. And if there's people that want to speak, to communicate, but they don't want the burdens that come from a federal spectrum license, then they have the opportunity to do that. There's lots of options. There's podcasts, there's cable shows. Those don't have the same type of federal public interest obligations that broadcasters do. But I think it's important that they do so. But again, that's the agenda that we're driving at. And the North Star there is we want these local broadcasters to feel empowered to actually serve the interests of their local communities and not simply become a pass-through for nationwide content coming principally from Hollywood and New York. We want localism. I think that's important that we empower our local broadcasters to do that.
Drew Fitzgerald, Wall Street Journal. Another media question, just to follow up on John's. With regard to the 60 Minutes proceeding, the response to the 60 Minutes complaint, but also the Enforcement Bureau is looking into Comcast, into Disney. You said all options are on the table. What options do you have available to you, especially given some of the limited enforcement powers that the FCC has in the wake of Supreme Court rulings over the past year?
Yeah. The FCC continues to have all the same tools at its disposal today that it did before. You may be indicating there was a recent Fifth Circuit decision in an AT&T case that the court held, at least in that case, that they believed that the FCC's fining authority, at least as applied there, didn't comply with the Seventh Amendment. Obviously, we respect the decisions of the appellate courts, but that continues to not be the case in terms of our own view. We have other very similar cases that are pending in other circuits. We've already submitted filings in those other circuits with 28J letters expressing our view that we disagree with the Fifth Circuit. So our position continues to be that the FCC can impose fines, impose license revocations, our full suite of potential remedies as to broadcasters and others, notwithstanding the Fifth Circuit decision and JARC-C, in part because the FCC has a mechanism in our statute where people can get a trial after the FCC's administrative proceedings have continued. So again, respect the Fifth Circuit's decision, but we disagree ultimately with the conclusion there, particularly as it applies to other circuits.
And a quick follow-up on that. Do you believe that license revocation can be used as can be used in response to violations of the public interest standard, even as it applies to the content of a broadcaster's news operations?
Well, look, I don't want to get sort of too far down the speculation path, but ultimately, license revocations is a tool that the FCC has in its toolkit. It's long been viewed as sort of the regulatory death penalty. So it's a pretty high bar to meet to go down that path, but it is, one of the options the FCC has, and we're, continuing to take a vigorous look at the public interest standard and making sure that the FCC enforces it. We've opened lots of investigations so far. We're going to see where they go. We've looked at Disney and ABC in particular for some of their DEI practices. There's some concerning things that we've seen there about potential discrimination that we are continuing to run down inside the building. And we'll see where that investigation on Disney and ABC goes. But again, there's some concerning elements there about potentially making race-based and gender-based discriminatory decisions. We'll still have to let that play out in terms of the process, but that's one where I'm particularly interested to see where it goes. So good. All right, thank you all. Appreciate it.